Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Toronto Council on Aging Masterclass Series, Combating Ageism, Celebrating Diversity, and Promoting Inclusion. And this week, we're featuring our third speaker in the series, Starr Smith. So just to give you a little bit of an idea about who the Toronto Council on Aging is, the Toronto Council on Aging is a nonprofit charitable organization that addresses the issues and concerns of older adults in Toronto. Our vision is to create a community that respects, values, and empowers seniors. We do offer a number of programs. So this is just one of many that we offer. We also have something called a community circle going on right now. It's through a Trillium grant, and that's virtual-based programming. So informative based, some on taxes, some on storytelling. We also have an active hour. So it's a blend of information slash physical activity that you can do through Zoom. That's completely free of charge. If you want to learn more about us as an organization, or if you have questions, our email is tca@pathcom.com, or if you want to check us out and find out a little bit more about what we do, you can visit our website. So about this series, seniors represent a growing segment of the population in Toronto, with more people over 65 than under 15, and many seniors are volunteers, work, or seeking opportunities to work in Toronto. Despite their ongoing contributions to our community, ageism continues to impact how seniors view themselves and the process of aging. Ageism is recognized as the most tolerated form of social prejudice, with 25% of all Canadians admitting age as a factor in how they're treated. So the Toronto Masterclass series is one approach that the TCA is using to combat ageism in the city of Toronto, and really to highlight the diverse, unique perspectives of aging held by seniors living in Toronto. So we hope that you enjoy the session. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Starr.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you here. It's interesting. I started out with a plan of what I thought might be good to share with everybody. And it took on a life of its own. So it's quite different. It's partly me being a cheerleader for all the things that are out there that need to be done by seniors. And it's about defending ourselves. And it's also about what made me, and hopefully you reflect on what made you who you are today. I'm 75, but in here, I'm touching my heart, which you can't see. Yeah, there you go. I'm still 16. Those were the words of Mrs. Goldsmith, wife of Commander Goldsmith, if you will, an attaché for Britain to the United Nations. She was the mother of my flatmate and very close friend when I lived in Chelsea in the 60s yet, and remained so until her death a few years ago. Her daughter Anna met and married a Californian, and so was very far from London, England. I traveled a lot in my business, and so visited Mrs. Goldsmith every time I got to London. Now I have reached 75 this year, and I think of her often and how right she was. In my heart, I am still 16. When I get the shock, of course, is when I look at the mirror and there's someone else looking back at me, like it's my mother, or maybe even my grandmother. But life is a balance. And I can't complain. My life has been fulfilling. I should say 3 lives, because it has taken so many twists and turns. Looking back makes me dizzy. My original choice of journalism as a career was appropriate. I was the 3-year-old who never stopped asking why. I still do so today. But I morphed into an editor, a businesswoman, a social worker, and a teacher. Now people introduce me as either a tenant advocate or, on a fierce day, an activist. Mostly, though, throughout all the titles, I'm a communicator. Communications is the common denominator in everything I do. I have concluded that life is a balance. I've never met anyone who is completely happy. Rather, they have had good times and bad times. The if only people of the world think that if only I was rich, I would be happy. Or if only I could find a job I loved, I would be happy. In my life, aspects of my life have always made me happy. Maybe happy is not always exactly the right word. Rather, it could be replaced by challenged or engaged or just plain curious. All of those words for me have delivered elements of happiness. I have gained material wealth and been homeless, but all of the shades of life have made me stronger and more determined. I believe if you get lemons, make lemonade. Despite what the financial planners will tell you, no one can plan for every eventuality, and I'm surely an example of that. For 30 years, I ran a communications consulting firm. Most called it an ad agency, and we were recognized as such. However, I thoughtfully made it a consultancy for a reason. I also made other rules, many of which were personal, because I hated the confining nature of accounting, so much a part of business, and was committed to integrity. I never wanted to face conflict of interest. The former, accounting, was easy because a colleague referred me to a gentleman who turned out to be a leading CA who brought his 2 giant Irish red setters to work every day. He was indeed a true gentleman, impeccably dressed, topped by a shock of silky white hair. I would never even have considered calling him by his first name, and never did. Turned out he handled a very few select major businesses, and then me. Why he agreed, I'll never know. I guess I looked so pathetic when I walked in. I walked in literally with the cliche of a shoebox full, overflowing with receipts. I had not done anything for my first year except put them in a drawer. That was the beginning of me understanding that luck is as important as an ability in a successful life as anything else. Without the introduction to Mr. Mayman, I would not have been as successful. He also became a teacher and a mentor. He told me never listen to accountants, we're too conservative. That was the kind of man he was. He was amazing. Eventually he retired, and I stayed with the young accountant who had worked for him and me in the past years. My financial plan had started and included savings for retirement, bonds, regular deposits, all eventually assisted by one of the top 5 Canadian accounting firms. I had planned, which was very unlike me. When the new guy tried to turn his practice into the McDonald's of accounting and hired many newcomers who spoke no English at all, none, I left. He thought if they knew numbers, English was not necessary. Well, I proved them wrong. He lined them all up in a long, narrow room, no windows, all facing the wall at this long counter. The poor boys, I felt so sorry for them. The exercise resulted in my first audit, resulting from miscommunication. They thought I said something, and and accounting is more than just numbers on a page. So I was then wooed by one of the biggies in accounting, Cooper's Lybrand, I think they were called then. They had many names and morphed into a whole bunch of different companies, but I stayed with them for the next, 15 years, I guess, until I closed my business. I told him at first he couldn't make money. I was too small a business. He could never make money. Oh, no, he said. Accountants aren't necessarily business people, I found out. Oh no, he said, no, this is a segment we need to nurture, I think was the word he used. Well, I stayed there, but every year they tried to raise my retainer into the stratosphere, and I fought like hell and said, no, I can't afford that, which they're accountants, they should have known. And we agreed on the same old rate. I think I paid them $5,000 a year the whole time. I never did end up getting an increase. I think they were afraid of me. Then the other objective of my business was integrity. It was not as hard to achieve as I thought. I thought it was going to be a real toughie. I found the solution. We only accepted one client from any one industry. That way, if I had a good idea, I didn't have to worry about which client in the same industry to give it to. And I didn't have to worry about giving away industry secrets from one client to another in the same business. So it worked out perfectly. And that worked for the whole 30 years I was in business. What the young seldom consider is the possibility of the impossible, serious illness. I was first diagnosed with terminal cervical cancer. When I didn't die as promised, they said it was my positive attitude. Imagine that. Cancer came to me at the right time. I was exhausted by decades of work hard, play hard, and give back to the community volunteer ethic. Cancer gave me the excuse to be totally selfish for the first time in my life. My business was stable, and I left a competent employee in charge. We were also covered by significant insurance, so I didn't have to worry about paying for anything. All did not go smoothly, however. I discovered the morning after my surgery, I woke up to my appointee standing by my bed with a check ledger in hand, wanting me to sign more checks. 2 days previous, I had signed enough checks to pay the entire city. But the real reason was she was in abject fear of what she had agreed to do. And it didn't come home to roost until she was standing in the office all by herself, and I wasn't there. But I had just had major surgery. But she figured her fear trumped my pain. And so I just said, go away. And she didn't. And then I said, go away. And she didn't. And then I screamed, go away. She finally got the message and left. But that day, feeling selfish or being selfish felt really good. I mean, I didn't know how it felt. I had always thought, you do something for somebody else first, and then if you have time, you do something for yourself. But in addition to being selfish, I decided to do whatever felt right. And I didn't know what that was in the beginning. What it turned out to be was, after the initial treatment for me was major surgery. And I won't go into the details, but I couldn't even get that simple. I had mega things they found when they started looking. So I came out of the surgery and I decided I would recuperate in Switzerland. I had a friend over there working. So I went and asked my oncologist, I said, can I travel? He said, travel. Do you feel well enough? I said, oh yeah. Anyway, of course, I didn't really know how weak I was. I don't think, until you start trying to be normal. But I did. And before I knew it, I was being screamed across Frankfurt Airport in a wheelchair with a very large German attendant shouting, Achtung, Achtung, at the top of her voice from the perspective of a wheelchair. It was quite a vision to see the crowds parting before me. And it turned out, except for a few moments of, am I really that stupid that I'm halfway around the world after having had major surgery? But it was a good thing. And I think when you do what you want, you get enough joy to keep you going. And it gave me wonderful joy. And of course, my friends over there treated me like a queen because they thought I was dead. I was going to be dead very soon. I never thought, even when they were telling me, because I asked, I said, what are my chances? And my oncologist turned around and said, why do you want to know? And I said, what do you mean, why do I want to know? He said, well, why do you want to know? And I said, well, because if I'm going to die, I want to have a hell of a good party first. And he said, oh, okay. He said, yeah, well, he said, at best you have about a 20% chance. He said, it's not very good. Some of the responses were funnier than anything else that was going on. It was as if, Oh, well, she's got her head in the right space. She's not going to die of depression. She's going to have a party. Okay, that was fine. And there's a whole other storyline around that doctor too. He would have practiced without patience if he could figure out a way to do it. He was so shy. He was even more terrified of women, never mind people in general, but women. Oh my goodness. And there were all sorts of little things. He'd obviously gone to class, and at one, and he'd be talking, and then he'd stick his hand out to shake my hand because it was not a natural movement. It was just somebody had told him in a class that women and men were equal now, and therefore you treat them like that's how you greet them. He was a darling, but he was a very good doctor. I was grateful to get him. So where do I go from here? After my rounds of radiation, which was the next phase, another, several months, I decided to recover back in the south of England, where I still had friends from the 60s. In fact, 3 of us roommates stayed close for the next 50 years. And Anna's now gone, and Tina is close to going. And that will be the last of my peers. And that's something that we have to deal with as we age, is that we are being left behind. And it was worse for me in many ways. I started losing people quite some time ago because a lot of my friends were older. And so they went earlier. So it's something you have to come to terms with somehow. It doesn't mean you don't miss them, you do. And I still, to this day, I've got friends who've been gone for a decade or more, and I still think I've got to pick up the phone to ask them something or to tell them something and realize they're not here anymore. So I guess I say that because I think knowing yourself helps you to move forward. Maybe some people think I'm nuts when I say that, but I do believe that if you can come to terms with life as it actually is, I mean, we all are born and we all eventually die, that, you carry on and you decide somewhere along the way what you're going to do. What am I going to do next now that so-and-so's not here, my beloved husband or my child even? That's the worst of all. And I hope more people think that way than burying themselves in grief. Now, we do take a long time to grieve, there's no question, and that's a natural part of life too. One of the other things I did during my recovery is one day I decided I was going to drive to Toronto. I had a beloved little red sports car, and I had never had the nerve to take it out full throttle. And this is where we get into what made me who I am. And my dad was living with me at that point, and he was in his late 70s. Anyway, I said, Dad, I'm going to go to Toronto. And he said, when? I said, oh, in a couple of hours, I'll leave. And he said, okay, dear. Nothing made my parents ever, whatever I wanted to do was fine. That, they were joyful that if I wanted to do something, that's fine. They trusted that it was the right thing. And so I did. At 4:30 that day, I got into my little car and I put the pedal to the metal. And I didn't see a single cop right across the prairies. I left from Edmonton. So about half the trip takes you to the Ontario border. Didn't see a single cop, and was amazed at how fast the car went, actually faster than the speedometer. The top of the speedometer, you could still accelerate beyond that. As soon as I crossed into Ontario, the damn OPP, and I kept thinking to myself, there's too many cops in Ontario. I lost my license 3 times that night, and early morning. And it cost me a lot of money, but was it ever worth it? I mean, the joy of, some people wouldn't have enjoyed it, obviously, but I like the G-forces and I like the wind flying through my hair. And so I did it. And I wasn't dangerous. I purposely drove at night so there wouldn't be a lot of traffic around. you do have to watch for wild animals, of course, because they move at night. So you have to watch in the ditches for the little glint of their eyes about to cross the road in front of you. I drove across Canada a few times, and one of the early days I came around a bend and there was a giant moose standing in my lane. And I just slammed on the brakes and turned off my headlights and sat there. And I'm thinking, I'm on the Trans-Canada. What if a truck comes along? I'll be dead. Anyway, turn on the light, just the parking beams first. And he was starting to walk across. He stopped and he turned. I'm going, oh my God, I turned off the lights again and sat there. And by the time I turned them on for the third time, he was in the ditch. He did turn around to come back after me, but I just let her go and got past. So that's who you had to watch out for. At night, not people or other vehicles. Even the trucks don't drive at night after that late. I don't know, maybe they do now, but they certainly didn't then. Getting my license back was another matter. I mean, obviously they didn't take it away from me, but I had to go to court when I got back. And in order to continue driving, I had to go before a judge. And he said, well, what hours do you work? Because when you get those kinds of speeding fines, even though every cop reduced my speed to be kind to me, but they still couldn't reduce it enough to not put me in real trouble. I said, well, you know, frequently I'm up at 5 in the morning to go to the airport to pick up a client. Well, what time do you finish work? And I said, oh, there's a lot of late nights. I mean, sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I mean, you work for the work. And he said, I have to take your license away for some time. And he didn't say another word. He looked down and he wrote, shaking his head, he only took my license away from 1 till 5 in the morning, so 4 hours a day. And I can't remember, it was either 3 or 6 months. It was a long time ago. But that's where, again, luck comes to play. It never occurred to me that if I couldn't drive, what was I going to do, you know? Especially out west. I mean, you'd die of cold waiting for a bus out there. There aren't any, unless you go to work at 8:30 and come home at 4:30. That's it. The rest of the day, it's a crapshoot. You don't know when you're going to get a bus. Healing. For months after the end of my cancer treatment, I gained strength until about the 3-month point, and I started going backwards. And to cut to the chase, I had very specific, the oncologist thought it was my thyroid. That is the number one reason for a person going backwards. And he sent me off to my GP to have a complete physical. Then he didn't, and I didn't have a GP, by the way. That's part of the reason they didn't find my cancer. I hadn't been to a doctor for 13 years. And he said, yeah, that's probably how old the tumor was. So I asked my father and my son's doctor if he'd take me, and I knew it was a busy practice. He hadn't been taking patients for years. They called them the jock docs. There were 3 of them. And they were very beautiful, and they were also very good doctors, general practitioners, and they cared. They loved what they did, all 3 of them. They were very different. They were all pretty, but they were very different in their personalities, but they all cared a lot about medicine. They loved being doctors, all of them, which is, I think, a good sign always. If someone loves what they do, they're very often good at what they do as well. But anyway, so he did a workup. He didn't say anything. And he said, I'm going to send you to a specialist. So he sent me to an internist. I thought, well, what the hell's an internist? So I asked the internist when I got there. And with a glint in his eye, he told me that an internist is a puzzle solver to figure out what's wrong to diagnose and figure out the treatment when nobody else can. No other doctor can. And of course, as I say, there was a glint in his eye and a little smile. But I still use that definition to this day. I thought it was so good, a puzzle solver. What I did have was chronic fatigue syndrome. He used the myalgic encephalomyelitis, which took me about 3 months to learn. Also in those days called more often than not yuppie flu. It was considered a malaise of rich people, that you ended up having this flu because you were just, oh my dear, I couldn't cope with life kind of thing. It was really a negative reaction to a very real illness. And do you know, that was in 91, and do you know to this day, they do not know what causes it. They think they're pretty sure it's a virus, but they don't know what causes it, and they have no cure. And if you have it for more than 24 months, you have it for the rest of your life. And that brings me to the next thing, which is that I was getting up to 23 months, and it was far worse than cancer. People don't think, people are scared, afraid of the big C. Oh my God, there's nothing worse than cancer. And not true. This illness, and the symptomology changes, but mine, I was the same every day. The majority of people who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome have good days and bad days, and they're like on a roller coaster. I was the same every day. And I finally worked it out that if I moved slowly and conserved my energy, like I did things like I changed my briefcase for a lighter one. I stopped carrying heavy objects. That was my first little rollator I got to put my briefcase on. So I wheeled, I didn't carry. I stopped wearing high heels. And I only still got 4 hours a day. Now that included showering, doing my hair, getting dressed, and going out and doing whatever I had to do. And I didn't tell my staff, or most of my friends actually, or acquaintances. I only had my close friends knew, because of the stigma of having chronic fatigue. Like people still after, and this goes back to, I think they discovered it in the 60s. I remember, I think I was still in high school when I first heard yuppie flu. But it means you have no life. I can't tell you how many times I would go out for lunch, and because you can't manage your life. This is the big lesson. You think you can, but no. You plan, I'm going to go for lunch for an hour, and it's going to take me a half an hour to get there. It's going to take me a half an hour to get home. That's 2 hours. And it's going to take me over an hour to get ready. So I have a buffer of a few minutes. I'll pop into the office and pretend I'm okay. That was another thing I'd learned for another day, but that people react to you with the volume of information they have. So if they've known you for a long time, they don't see those changes. You can really fool people a lot of the time because I was so, by the way, brain dead is a big part of chronic fatigue syndrome. People talk about the pain and this falling asleep, and I did all those things. But the biggest thing for me was cognitive dysfunction. I would literally, when I would go into the office, and I do it a couple of times a week at least, they still thought I was recovering from cancer. They would be actually having to give me at least one word for every sentence I said, and they didn't know it. I'd go to say something and I'd miss a word. I'm a communicator. How could I be missing one word out of every sentence? But that's the way it worked. And they never figured it out. They never understood. So it's another interesting lesson in life that people aren't detail oriented, and that you maybe can't fool all the people all the time, but you can fool some of the people some of the time. if you need to. I don't really believe that. But anyway, coming up to the 2-year mark, when I knew if you're not cured in 24 months, that's it for the rest of your life. And I belonged to a support group at the behest of my internist. And I said, I don't believe in those things. He said, look, he said, those people know more than I do or any of the other doctors in this city do. You go to those meetings. And they were right. Here were these dreadfully sick people, not only trying to keep themselves moving forward, but doing all the research and finding out all the new information, the new studies around the world to try and find a cure. Now, of course, they never did. And most of them had already passed the 2-year mark when I met them. But though they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant people to be fighting so hard for themselves and others. And we also found a lot of the asides to some of this stuff. Doctors, because a lot of them didn't believe it existed. We had more new members come in with new glasses because you get a brain fog. And so, oh, you can't see, we're going to give you glasses. Well, these people, now they're being made blind because they don't need glasses. And then the other side of it is, oh, you're depressed. So they come in as high as a kite or drugged to be like automatons. They'd walk in and they were, oh my God, you cannot believe. And the third thing we found out that would happen so often, the oncologist knew as much about chronic fatigue as anybody on the planet. It is a very common side effect to the treatment for cancers, all kinds. And it didn't seem to matter whether you got chemo or whether you got radiation. It was just something that happened after treatment for cancer to so many people. So they knew almost as much as we did. And they were big supporters of our organization as a result. So things that people don't say because of things that people don't say for political reasons or because they're going to be embarrassed. It's another life lesson, or it was for me anyway. And I now try to speak out as much as I can, and I take risks by doing so, speaking up against big landlords, government, politicians, trying that someone will notice and say, if she can do it, I can do it. It doesn't happen a lot, but we've had quite a few victories. Anyway, does anybody have any comments? I'm ranting on here.
Starr, how did you get involved in the advocacy work, tenant advocacy work?
I became a tenant. I had never been a tenant in my life. And when I retired, somebody along the line said, you don't want to take care of a house anymore. And by the time I realized that was a big mistake, I could not afford to buy back in Toronto. I had spent a lot of what would have been the down payment. But anyway, I moved here, and at first it was fine. There was a family business by a family called Longo, who are distant cousins of the grocery Longos. And then they sold to Capri. And they were rude. I'm thinking, they were ordering me about. And I'm thinking, I don't work for you, you work for me. I didn't say anything at that point. I'm a new tenant. I'm thinking, surely to God, I'm paying you in order to house me. And you're not doing, even before I understood what needed to be done, I knew that if your taps leaked, they should unleak them, come and put in a washer. And the rudeness, and Capri has a policy of, and it's amazing how well it works for a lot of people, that they intimidate, they harass, and they put you in your place. They didn't count on me, and we have an open dialogue. They actually put a senior manager 2 levels up from a site manager in charge of our project with the words that I think I may have said. This has been identified as a problem property, and with a little wink at me. I was the problem, of course. And we've cost them a great deal of money. AGIs, for example. The last one, they wanted 2.2 million and they got less than $1 million, which is, I don't know if anybody knows about AGIs, but usually if you can reduce your amount by 1%, it's considered a lot. Now, it took 3.5 years to get that. And we also, along with that, we negotiated that they would not give another AGI for another 1.5 years, which has now been 2.5 because COVID intervened. And that that we would be paying them the amount that they did win over a many-month period. I can't remember now, 5 months or 6 months, to make it easier for tenants. Because even though you tell a tenant, you put that extra money aside in case they win, people, if they have extra money, they spend it. So giving the extra time worked. I'm expecting another AGI any minute now. I'm not sure though, because we got a notice saying that there was going to be major construction coming up and that they were going to try and minimize the effects and all that. And I've now have a meeting with this 3rd level manager next week. And I've already written them and said, you know, the reason you have to give 90 days before major construction is so tenants can decide. They have a month to decide whether they want to go through it or not. And they have still the 60 days notice required by law to tell you they're leaving. If you aren't going to tell us what you're going to do, because they didn't say a thing about what they're planning to do. Oh, well, we don't quite, I said, no, you're going to have to start all over again, because that is the reason for the long notice before. And we went through it when they first took over the building. They didn't give any notice. The day they took over the building, I opened my front door and there's no carpet in the hall. Beautiful 60-ounce plush with underlay, and it was gone. Brand new. It was hardly put in. I think maybe a year old. Well, they continued that work for, well, probably close to 9 months, because then they'd stop work and leave us in rubble, and then they come back. They did nothing to minimize or mediate the dust and the dirt, and people had asthma, and you know, so fool me once, shame on me, or shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So it ain't happening, and they know. And from that, the other good thing about the AGI is they thought they could bully us, because the key item was they put in a new roof and they wanted $900,000 and change. And I said, but it's leaking. Brand new roof is leaking. I need to see the engineering. You get to ask for disclosures at the beginning. So I asked for engineering reports on the roofing. I had about 14 items, but that was the biggest money item. And they kept coming back to the next hearing would be scheduled. We go back and, you know, I'd say, well, I haven't received any of the disclosures. And so I'm not prepared to proceed. I need that. Oh, okay, so we canceled here. And then we have another one. We did that for 2 years. And finally, in exasperation, I said to the member, and of course, every time you get a different adjudicator called members. And so they don't know what happened before. Like now it's even worse, because I just went to my first online hearing, and oh my God, those poor people. There's people being thrown on the streets for no reason. We had a witness who never got let in. She could hear everything going on, but she was never put up on the screen. Now, fortunately, we didn't need her and we prevailed anyway. But what else is going on? If they can't even get the technical side right, I mean, So the end of that story was I finally, in exasperation, said to this adjudicator, I said, is there no way we can compel them to deliver the information? Oh, all right, she says, I'll write an order. I'd asked lawyers. I'd asked every help center I could think of, the Federation, Sierra, Clio. I mean, just the list went on. Nobody knew what the damn, it's an order. So she writes an order compelling the other side to submit the information by a certain date. And then you know what they did? They still didn't give up and say, we don't have any engineering report. They sent a sales report saying, here's what wonderful things our roofing company's going to do, and a quote. And I'm thinking, how stupid do they think we are? You know? So anyway, but finally they admit, and that's when they wanted to settle. And so that took another several months because they keep thinking. And the most of the inroads we've made with the landlord have been through mediation. And it's not an ideal outcome because it doesn't go on the record as a court. Like, mediations are totally in camera. You are forbidden to share anything that happens in a mediation. All that comes out of it publicly is the result. And that doesn't even go on the legal record because it was agreed to by both parties. So it doesn't advance the cause of the tenant. But we can't afford lawyers. I mean, I've got a couple of lawyers that have been kind enough to talk to me. One of them was in tears one day. He said, Starr, I can't afford to do that kind of law anymore. I have to support my children. And there's no money. Tenants don't have money. There's very few tenants that have money. The odd case, there was a very famous balcony case about 10 years ago that the landlord took away everybody's balcony and put up Juliet, the wrought iron in front of the window. It's called a Juliet balcony. And the adjudicator, I'll never forget her words. She said, what? She said, that's just a piece of fence to keep the tenants from falling out of the building. And it's true. It's not a balcony, but they do call them balcony. They call them Juliet. And she gave them a retroactive rent decrease for years. I think it went back 6 years because they'd been fighting that long. And so there are some good adjudicators, and my, bless her heart, I'll never forget her name, Anna Solomon, who wrote me the order. Oh, anyway, it's, and people have helped people. Like right now, I just left the what have they got? Reevaluation of Rent Safe Toronto meeting. And in that meeting, another person is another tenant chair of another CAPREIT group of buildings in the East End. And we gradually have talked to each other. And now, I mean, we get the strangest things. I mean, a few months ago, we had a panic call from people in Flemington Park or Thorncliffe Park, who told us that their tenants speak 159 languages in their building. 159. We're saying, what? Do you repeat that? No, 159 languages in one building. It's a very long semicircular apartment building built in the late 60s. And they had, through changes in landlord, they were, what do they call them? That take care of buildings. And the paperwork had gotten screwed up. And they were in a panic because this AGI was like doubling their rent. And it was a lower priced building complex, and they couldn't afford it. Anyway, my colleague in another CAPREIT building, I don't know how they found her, she called me, and together over a weekend, we cobbled together a defense. And the next morning, well, Monday morning, because this was Friday night. We worked Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. Monday morning, they got from property management, the new property management company got back and basically canceled the whole AGI. But had they not said anything, had they not tried to fight it even at that late date, they would have ended up paying, and so many people would have ended up without a home. So
it's a question for you, Starr. Mark's got a question for you. Mark, if you want to unmute
Hi,
yourself,
Mark.
ask the question.
Hi.
Hello, thank you. This is quite a tale. I hate to cut you off and ask you a question.
No.
I'm just wondering, you just partly answered it just now. Question being, are you basically a lone wolf, or lone warrior, or do you have people you found to work with you both in your building and elsewhere? And maybe say a little bit about how you actually get other folks engaged and involved rather than just sitting back and waiting for the stuff to hit the fan,
Well, we have the initial association is Mimico Estates Tenants Association, and that was formed as a result of just the bad treatment. And no, actually, I guess it was formed as a result of the first AGI, above guideline rent increase. And the tenants were so, we asked the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations, Eurydice, do you know about them? Okay, it's FMTA. And if you call them, they will help you set up an association. And it's been so hard during COVID, but hopefully now that it's opened up, they will come, they will flyer every single door in your building or buildings. In our case, we have 11 buildings. And then they call them, that flyer calls a meeting, and it says what we're going to talk about, the AGI, forming an association, whatever. And Eurydice does an initial information session. And she is brilliant. And she's been doing it now. Well, she did it for us in, I can't even remember now. It must have been about 2015, because Capri bought the property in 2013. So yeah, 2015 was when we formed. She's still there doing the same job, and she is so good at it. And she has connected some of the other dots of putting landlord associations together so that we can compare notes on what they're doing in other buildings. Like, is Capri reducing staff and security and maintenance in all of the buildings? Yes, the answer is yes. That's where we are now as a big group. That is, we haven't figured out how. Acorn actually named our landlord Capri as how do I say this? It's a very awkward name. There's a national tenants union against Capri. That's across the country. They have members, Capri tenants, with the same story across the country. What hasn't been done yet, and that was formed in December of 2020. And I'm not a member of Acorn. I probably should be anyway, but some of their tactics and the misinformation is not to my liking. They have big marches where, everybody's on the street, and at the end of it, the tenants don't do as well as we do on our own in negotiating actual money back. And they also, I don't know, they're rough around the edges in a lot of things. So I'm never sure, because they've also done good work. I mean, that Capri National Tenants Union and they do have members across the country. So I'm of two minds, and as I say, I use that National Tenants Union as an example all the time, and yet I haven't paid up and become an official member of Acorn. Nothing is black and white in this world. I used to think so when I was younger, and everything's gray. What was the other question you asked? So anyway, we had over 25% of our residents came to that first meeting, and somebody out of the crowd yelled my name. Starr can do it. She's already got us money back on property taxes. And I did not find out until 2 years ago. After COVID started, I found out that the tenant who yelled out of the crowd was my neighbor across the hall. She never told me them. I was thinking, who said that? Anyway, needless to say, yeah. Anyway, I did have a formal, the next month I called a meeting and we had an official thing, and nobody else wanted to do it, basically. I mean, I was the default position. And, you know, in the beginning, I knew nothing. I had to learn the hard way. I had to just pick up the phone and phone every number I could think of that had tenant in it. But through that, I have met such impressive people. They are really true people you want for your neighbors, people who are fighting for a just society, people who don't have another agenda. And I mean, there's a part of my presentation which talks about the descriptors of these poor, old, lonely people. And I'm thinking, you know, well, I say, I mean, why don't we celebrate the Hazel McCallions of the world? She just turned 101. She is not lonely. She is not isolated. She is very happy. She has a life that she now gets to do more of her gardening, which I don't think she probably got to do any of for the last 25 years. And they were interviewing her, and the fire department came to wish her happy birthday. I thought, you know, how good is that? You get the bloody fire department, and there was like trucks and firemen everywhere wishing Hazel. So I think we need to celebrate more of that. And there are a lot of seniors doing that kind of work. Now, it isn't for everyone. And I don't want to deny the people who pursue creative pursuits, people who have talent to do, who paint or do crochet, or, you know, all of the other wide range. One of my other groups, I'm a director of an association called Mimico Lakeshore Community Network, and we have cobbled together about 20 associations along the lakeshore that on important issues, like we saved 14 trees last month. So we get together as a bigger group, we have more power, and we get to say, hey, wait a minute, no, you're not. You're not going to kill 14 very mature trees to put in a sidewalk that nobody needs because one person called. There's no way, the kids don't use that side of the street. There's no gate out of the fence to let them get out there. And you want to put in a sidewalk and kill 14 trees. And there's a crossing guard right at the bottom that crosses the sidewalk on the other side of the street. You know, so we got a 5-year reprieve. And by then, trees will be even more important than they are now. So that is another group. And one of the members of that is, where was I? I lost my train of thought. One of our members is here actually, or he was, Les. There he is. I have lost my train of thought. I apologize. But the point is, you get to do different things, because in that group, I know what it was. We have a residents association who is now coming around to thinking that maybe tenants aren't dirt. It's quite an affluent neighborhood. So the residents are mostly homeowners who look down their nose at tenants, and they don't so much anymore. It's quite amazing. We have Long Branch, who are, as the old term is, tree huggers, but they have a great deal of knowledge about the tree canopy and what it means to climate change. You know, like, and they're fighting for a different thing, but my fight was just, how stupid can you get that you would kill 14 mature trees for no reason? You know, I mean, I believe in, you know, arm of the city says we have to have X number of extra trees to meet our objectives. And then in the next week, they're saying, oh, well, we're cutting down those 14 trees and don't expect a backlash. And then we had another thing up on the Queensway, for any of you who know the West End, Complete Streets, it's called. And they're doing that all over the city whenever they need to do construction of any kind. The city is now mandated to get together with all their cohorts in the various aspects like water drainage, paving, sidewalk, concrete people for sidewalks, and try and do the projects together to save money. And there's two big priorities. One of them is safety, which means they want to put boulevards down the middle of any road they can, because that's proven to save lives, to have the median there for people to stop if they don't get across. And the second thing is bike lanes. Bike lanes are huge, like they want to put bike lanes everywhere. And I'm not averse to that either. I mean, it's better than ruining the environment with our exhaust, even though I am of the wrong generation.
Les has a question for you, Starr.
Pardon?
Les has a
Oh,
question.
hi, Les. Anyway, maybe that helps you understand. It just sort of is fluid. Les?
Yeah, so both the province and the city are looking at trying to solve the housing issue by having more rental housing all across the city. So with that will come a lot of new tenants, especially immigrants to the city, who will not have the knowledge of what should be done in cases like this. There was recently on television, I think it was a Chinese person who actually had the landlord move in with him to do renovations while he's living there. And he's trying to figure out what to do. He's trying to get answers from the city, and they're not able to do it. So I'm just wondering, what can a group like you're with, can they do to help other tenants across the city to cope with this kind of stuff?
Well, I think I have learned a lot more about Rent Safe Toronto. So it's Rent Safe TO. And I just learned another thing today. I had the lead on the reevaluation of the Rent Safe program phoned me today on another matter. And she gave me a piece of information on a very slight difference that in wording that I didn't think Rent Safe covered, and they do. So that's the place to start. And it's as easy. You dial 311. Well, it's not easy if you don't speak English. You dial 311 and you say, I want to talk to Rent Safe, and because I've got XYZ problem. And if they try to, and you say, I need a confirmation number, you have to get a number, because we're having a problem trying to figure out what to do, because 311 is a provincial entity trained by the province. And gee, don't you know that they have been giving out the wrong information? They have been telling tenants when they call, oh, I already know about that, so you don't have to report. Well, yeah, you do, because they evaluate based on the number of calls against every building that they have on their list, which is 3,500 apartment buildings. That's where you start. And you know, I always want to say, oh, just have them call me, but I can't say that anymore, because I'm just about, like, tonight is going to be such a relief. I have been so overcommitted. I have been doing a bad job. And I also I just found out 3 more evictions this month that I just found out about. Good old Capreed is in action again. They were very quiet for a while, but they're not right now. And those defending those are really, they're not, you just don't go and stand there on the other end of Zoom or WebEx, I guess. Is it WebEx or Zoom? Anyway, I did my first one. And I still can't believe anybody's allowing it. It's Mickey Mouse justice. It's like a Cracker Jack version. If you're lucky, you get a prize. But when some people can't even get connected, you know, and people have been fighting this. I mean, I'm sure we've all read articles along the way about how this new virtual thing, and our mighty premier has made it permanent. We're not even out of COVID yet. He's made it permanent. And you know why? Because he's going to save a lot of rent. And it's easier because people are now, I don't think it's going to stay that. It's going to stay like that. It's just not just. What happens if you have evidence? What are you going to do? Hold it up in front of your little screen? I don't think so. So, and they're going based on the fact that, you know, you should hear them go through it. It's like bang, 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 just and this and that. And, you know, people clearly, some of them can't. I mean, one of the, what they call them, a host, they triage. They triage it at the beginning about who goes where. And one of these hosts the guy repeated his question 3 times, clearly because he did not understand English. And the other thing that happened, I don't know when, I only discovered it about 6 months ago, the only languages it serves is French and English. Give me a break. We live in Toronto. Before, they used to try and find duty counsel or somebody, you know, around that would volunteer to be a translator. Nope, won't do that anymore. It is so unjust, and it's Mickey Mouse law. It's political law. And so that means that if you hope to get justice, you have to go through the thing, go through the hearing, get turned down, you know, fail, and then you have to immediately ask for a review, which most people don't even know exists, and then you have to go to Court of Queen's Bench and get real common law justice. The problem is Court of Queen's Bench is expensive, and even if you're low income and you can get your fees waived, you still have to know how to put together a legal file. Now, I do know how, just because of my many lives I've lived. And when I came here, I'd won a few cases in Alberta over the years, thanks to my contract lawyer, who I'm sure lived vicariously through me. He was a very shy guy, and we got to be friends because I helped him try and find another wife. His first wife left him. And he just, oh no, Starr, you can do that yourself. I'll help. And that's how I got. And I did have 2 years of law in my journalism program, mostly contract law. Taught me how to keep very good notes, which to this day I do. I can swear 10 years after a thing happened, I can go back in my notes and verbatim tell you what went on. And the other thing, it was my my slander and libel knowledge is pretty good too, because if you're a journalist, those are 2 things you have to be careful not to do.
It sounds like your stories kind of come back full circle, Starr. So you're getting back to how kind of your educational training is helping your work now, but the time has gone by so fast, and I cannot thank you enough for sharing your experience.
Oh my God, look at the time.
Time flies when you're having fun, and thank you so much for everyone who participated tonight and came out. This is, you know, one of many talks in our series, but we absolutely appreciate you sharing your insight and your experience. Oh, someone said they interviewed for a position at Capri and left feeling like they had dismissive,
good word,
entitlement with the interviewer at least. Yeah, it's very sad, but hopefully you gained some information about what you can do if you are a tenant, and you've at least met Starr, so you know maybe where you can reach out, you know, if you don't know how to get started. Hopefully Starr can start inspiring others to get involved and make that difference.
Well, I think the message is more that if you want to get involved, if you have a question, you're bored or whatever, and you want to try something new, advocacy work of all kinds. Tenant law is only a small part. There's, oh God, you know, I can give you a list a mile long. And if you want to get involved, it's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of very good people. And it gives you a sense of value, I think. It's not for everybody. It certainly isn't for everybody. For me, I'm Irish. What can I say? I'm a storyteller and I love a fight. So the combination is great for advocacy.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great evening.